Hello everybody, and welcome back to another Kings of War Battle Report. I'm Visibly Riley, and today we have Undead versus Undead in an uncivil civil war. This battle was fought at 2,300 points, and the scenario was push. So first off, we have my opponent's list, which opens with 2 hordes of werewolves, a horde of skeleton warriors, 3 regiments of wraiths, 2 regiments of soul reaver infantry, a regiment of skeleton spearmen, a Lycanus, 2 death pack regiments, Lady Alona, Morgoth, and then 2 necromancers, both of whom have weakness. The only thing I don't really like about this list is the skeleton spearmen regiment. Those points can probably be better spent elsewhere, but I do know that this was based off of just models that were on the table, so, you know, you get what you get. There is something else interesting about this army, but I will talk about that later in the battle report. But for now, you can postulate on what that is. Next up, we have my Undead list, which opens with a horde of Revenant Cab with the Sir Jesse's Boots of Striding, so the J Boots. Then we have a horde of werewolves with the Caterpillar Potion, 2 regiments of wraiths, a regiment of revenants, a white horde with the Meat of Madness, a Revenant King on Undead Great Flying Worm with the Brew of Sharpness, a Lycanus with the Blade of Slashing, Morgoth, a Lich King with Boots of Levitation and Drain Life 7, so Morgoth Jr., and then an Undead ASB with the Loot of Insatiable Darkness. This is not exactly what this is not the strongest list I could have built, but I wanted to try out the Morgoth, essentially the double Morgoth with the Lich King and Morgoth going up, and I needed to pull the points from my army elsewhere. So I downgraded one of the white hordes to werewolves. I got rid of the 2 zombie regiments, and then I got rid of the dragon, the vampire dragon, and put in a Lycanus instead. And then that bought me the Lich King and the ASB, which is in the Revenant Cab upgrade, which is another thing I really wanted to try out, was the horde of Revenant Cab over the horde of Revenants. So yeah, it's okay, but I'll probably continue iterating on this in the future. This is a very rough draft. So next up we have Push, which is a pretty simple scenario. You roll, after you set up your forces, you roll a d3, and that's how many loot counters each player has to set up in their setup area. You can carry it on units if you want, or you can just put it wherever. And then there's also 1 loot counter in the center of the field. You get 2 victory points for each loot counter you hold, with your unit being entirely on the opponent's side of the field. And then you got 1 victory point if you hold it on, or at least half on your side. So yeah, it's interesting. I thought this was I thought Push was changed to being mostly on your opponent's side of the field instead of entirely, but I guess that's Invade that changed. So interesting there, you have to be entirely on your opponent's side of the field. But anyway, moving forward, here we see the table. And here we see the loot counters. So the 2s, my opponent has a 2 there, and then I have a 2 here. We just put both the loot counters onto 1 unit each. My opponent chose the Skeleton Warrior Horde, and I chose the Revenant Regiment. And then this one, of course, is the one in the center of the field. And as for terrain, we have 2 Height 7 forests, followed by 2 Height 1 Graveyard, very apropos. Then we have 3 Height 3 hills, 2 Height 2 obstacles attached to a hill and a building each, and then of course we have the aforementioned Height 4 impassable, so that building right there. So that's it for the terrain. It's all right. This game was very late. We didn't get started. I mean, I think I built the table at 11 and we got started at almost exactly midnight. So it was a late one. So first off, we have my opponent's army. Off here on the left, we have the first horde of werewolves. Then right next to it, we see the Lycanus. Then to the right of that, we have the second horde of werewolves and the first regiment of Death Pack. Then to the right of that, we have the first regiment of wraiths with the first necromancer back here. My opponent's characters are all on round bases. It's not that big of a deal because I have proxy bases for everything, so I can just whip out a 20 mil to see exactly where a model will lie. But yeah, this was a very learning how to play the list for my opponent here, I think, because I don't think they've ever played Undead before. So yeah, you just put down the models. Next up, we have the horde of skeleton warriors with Morgoth behind them. To the right of that, we have the 2nd Regiment of Wraiths, the 2nd Necromancer with Weakness, the 1st Regiment of Soul Drinkers? the Soul Reavers, whatever the vampires are called. Second Regiment of Vampires, the Second Regiment of Death Pack, Alona, or as my opponent was calling it, Leon, Alona's brother, since that's a male vampire model. Then we have the Second Regiment of Vampires, followed by the Third Regiment of Wraiths, taking a bit of a dirt nap there, and finally that Regiment of Skeleton Spearmen. And then off here on the good undead side, or the sand undead side, we have the first horde of werewolves with the Caterpillar Potion. We have my Revenant King on Flying Worm with the Brew of Sharpness, and we have the Revenants with all of my loot tokens. Then to the right of that, we have my horde of Revenant Cav, played by Chariots today. I'm not sure. I'll probably, if I continue playing this army, I probably will run the Chariots as Revenant Cav if I'm going to run Revenant Cav. I really like the new Bone Reaper OCRs, or whatever the Games Workshop new the new version of Tomb Kings is. If you take out the heads, which are atrocious, and replace them with the Tomb King heads, which I have, the scale is actually really good, but the models are a little expensive for me right now. I've lost 2 cars this year, and 2019 hasn't exactly been a great fiscal year. So it's a little much for me, and I could just run my Chariots because Undead don't have Chariots, and this is a classic example of a counts as unit. But anyway, I digress. Behind them is my ASB. This guy's an ASB today because I haven't finished painting the ASB model. So the ASB with the Loot of Insatiable Darkness. Off to the right of that, in this blurry picture, we have both the regiments of Wraiths with Morgoth right here. You can see poking out right there, that's the Lich King with Boots of Levitation and Drain Life 7, so mini Morgoth. And then the horde of Wights with the Mead of Madness. And finally, we have, not pictured in this, or barely pictured, is the Lycanus with Blade of Slashing. So we go on to turn 1, and I chose to I won the roll-off, and I chose to give my opponent the first turn. And my thoughts here were, Morgoth and Alona is a pretty big counter to Morgoth. So I wanted to see if my opponent would push aggressively forward, and if they did, then I could fly my Morgoth off and get the Drain Life 16 with Morgoth and Morgoth Jr. to try to kill one of these characters off. But my opponent played a little bit pensively, holding back most of their force, which I think is pretty smart. You can see the werewolves coming around the side. I decided to just do a refuse flank because my army was significantly smaller than my opponent's. So I'm just going over here. I left these guys. The Wights are my plan to handle this bit. If the werewolves come into me piecemeal, I can do it that way. If they decide to rush me, then I have the Lycanus, the Wights, and then these guys, the Wraiths, that I can just turn around and go for these surge charges. So that's the plan there. The Lycanus will probably just leave because the Lycanus is speed 9, so it doesn't matter too much. And anyway, so my opponent's advance looks pretty normal. It looks like everything went, or the skeletons went 5, and then the Wraiths went slightly faster to get their leader point onto this hill so they can see. You can see the Wraiths here deciding again to go 7, Wraiths here going 7, and then 5 and stuff. It's actually kind of interesting with this army because of the differences in speeds that all the units have, that they're creating this really nice checkerboard almost on accident. And I am not trying to say my opponent accidentally did this, but you could just move all your units, as fast as possible forward and create a nice checkerboard, is what I'm saying. Otherwise, you can see some of the characters just floating around in the back. And my opponent goes for a weakness first here onto my Revenant Cav Horde because I could get a weird... I've searched 20 in the list, so I could, surge over the hill and charge something. So they went for a weakness there. And then, of course, a weakness on my Wights. I'm not sure this does anything, but you might as well if you're gonna go for it turn 1. So I will mention that I misinformed my opponent in this game, and I told them weakness was range 30. I was confusing it with Mind Fog for the second, so my opponent plays weakness in this game as if it were range 30. So moving forward, we see the end of that turn shot, and we go into turn 1 for the Sand Undead, or my Undead. So first off, I do take my Lycanus and I just whip it around to the front here. It's very central now. I don't really need it to do a whole lot. I probably should have... I didn't go 18, I only went 9. And so when I did this turn, I probably should have cut a little deeper and then ended with the unit like this. but there were so many units on this hill right here that I was actually worried about maybe getting flanked with a weird surge or something I didn't see. So instead I decided to do this, and I think I actually needed the Lycanus to support this way, or to actually add some interdiction that way. So a bit of a mistake there. I move forward with Morgoth, and my plan is to go for a Mind Fog onto a Death Pack. I believe they're an 11-13 for Nerve, so, or maybe a 10-12. Yeah, it's 10-12. So, you know, it's a hard roll, but I don't think Morgoth is in any danger. And the only thing that can really go for my Morgoth is my opponent's Morgoth. And I kept my Lich King, who's cowering back here, out of range of that on purpose to make sure that I couldn't lose the Lich King right now. But Morgoth versus Morgoth is not exactly a great fight, since Morgoth is Def 5 and a 14-16 and has regen. So yeah, I move forward to do that Mind Fog, and then that'll be that. The rest of my army moves forward just a little bit. I do not keep my frontage even, and it's, I don't know, sometimes it's a mistake against Undead to do that because they can always surge into your flank, but we have such a heavy presence of hills in the middle of the field that it's really hard to actually see anything. So I'm not too afraid of it, and with only a speed 7, they'd need a really hefty surge to get into any of the flanks here. And on top of that, the only thing that could do that is a regiment of Wraiths versus one of my regiments of Wraiths, and even with 24 attacks, they're unlikely to do enough damage for me to really care. So I leave the units like that. I do keep myself out of the charge distance of any of my opponent's units on purpose, obviously, because when you're playing against Undead, especially if you are Undead, you want to make it so they have to surge against you. So I went for that. Over here, you can see my weakness cap, but I move forward with these guys. I actually thought that when I placed them down, I could clear this wall with a 5-inch move, but obviously super super wrong there. I only get about 50% onto it, which will mess up my charges for next turn if I go for them, but it's what happens. And over here, I run with my werewolves and my Revenant King, and I just go for a hard flank here. My werewolves have Pathfinder, so I'm not too worried about this forest, and then of course this is a pretty big threat with its Crush 3 and 10 attacks. So that's the plan, and here's the end of turn 1 shot. You can see we're sort of rotating around each other like this. All the fast elements from my opponent are going to try to come over here, while my fast elements are going over here. The difference is because I am a much more compact army, I have charges no matter what my opponent does here. I can always charge. But over here, my opponent, I was able to actually remove any charges. And I think this unit ends up being corrected at the after this picture is taken, and I just correct it to see a bit better so the werewolves don't just run by. So they can't run too well because none of these have Pathfinder, so they can't run through this forest and really mess me up, but I needed to be able to see to this edge, right? So I adjusted a little bit. Anyway, the point is my opponent can't actually reach me just yet unless they do some crazy surge stuff, while I've locked them into I will charge you no matter what you do. So that's the plan, and we move into turn 2. So turn 2 for my opponent, they cast Weakness onto my dragon as a good target, especially with the amount of Def 6 and Def 5 in my opponent's army. So weakness there, and then there's another weakness that fails to go off. I think it went at the whites, either the whites or the Lycanus, and it fails. So yeah, only weakness is on my dragon. Otherwise, my opponent advances, again, pretty pensively. This is a good maneuver right here with the werewolves. So they ran forward with them, cleared the wall, and then put this unit right here that's Death Pack in front of them so my whites can't charge, because I do have the Mead of Madness, of course. And it is a bit of a weird one because my Lycanus can see these werewolves, and with Nimble I can get around, hit the corner, and then slide in. I fit perfectly, but the Lycanus only had 5 attacks, so it's not the biggest threat, and those werewolves will probably actually kill it if I charge, if I charge with my Lycanus into them. So yeah, it's an interesting move. The mistake I think my opponent makes is they keep these werewolves back. I think these werewolves wanted to move forward to threaten a better front here. They probably could have moved to just out of 15 of these guys, and then also had the Lycanus, the Lycanus back here is fine. It's not that big of a deal to have it so it can't charge just yet. Again, a Lycanus only has 5 attacks, and our armies aren't really comprised of easy to kill units. So my easiest are Morgoth and the Lich King, which are not exactly easy. So the Lycanus staying back is fine. But I think this is a mistake, not pushing forward with the werewolves. We see the rest of the army just sort of inching forward. They have taken the center, and this is when I'm looking at my opponent's list and I'm like, wow, they have such a better frontage than I do, right? Like, and these are all dangerous units. There's 3 regiments of raids versus my 2. There's 2 hordes of werewolves. There's everything. It's two regiments of vampires. I'm like, oof, I don't know how I'm gonna push past this, and I'm starting to wonder about my list construction. So yeah, my opponent does keep their units back a little bit, although they do put this unit of raids purposefully onto the hill, again, to be able to see over it. I think right now they are protected against my cav because this unit right here is slightly forward, right? It's slightly beyond this to make it so I can't actually land here. Or maybe... yeah, they're slightly beyond, so I can't land my cav. It might not look like it, and it might have slid, but that was the discussion we were having. By the way, this game took almost 4 hours, so strap in. So yeah, we do that. The skeletons just stand right in front of us. I think this is a mistake with the vampires, and it's because they're gonna. If I charge into these 2 units right here, which is likely, or I mean, I might not. It depends. But if I charge into these 2 units, the vampires can't actually get around to help because they will end up being trapped in by these raids because the skeletons can't. They could sidestep this way, which doesn't leave enough room for the vampires. They can't back up out of it because the vampires are behind them, and they can't go this way because of the wraiths. And if the wraiths back up, they can't do it before the vampires, and so on and so forth. So there's a bit of a traffic jam right there going on, and it could have been alleviated by just having the vampires move slightly this way to make sure that they clear this unit. So anyway, let's move into turn 2 for the my Undead. So first off, I have weakness. I do get a Bane Chant onto my Revenant King, but I saw the Lycanus had a bit of just a slight flank onto the wraiths here, so I go for that. I take my wraiths. Jeez, I was like, oh, wraiths, whites, right? There's a million wraith units. I take my wraiths and charge into the death pack, who are currently missing, so you might guess how that combat goes. And then I take my werewolves and go into the skeleton spearmen. So werewolves, on average, it's, you know, what is that, like 9-ish wounds to those skeletons. So I'm not too upset about that. I mean, that's a 6 to kill them. I don't even think it's a 6 twice because I don't think Alona is in range. So a 6 once to kill them, pretty good. And even if they get the counter charge, they can't really do a whole lot. And again, these vampires are jammed up. They can't actually join the fight against my werewolf. So I'm not really worried about it. I did forget to mention that Alona blasted me with her Lightning Bolt 3 and did 2 damage to me last turn. But anyway, so those charges go out, and here is the end of turn shot. So I decide to just leave my whites here. I couldn't get them in a place where they weren't going to get charged. My opponent just has too many units for me to fight. But I do get them out of range of the Lycanus, which is less important because I just fly Morgoth over here. My Morgoth, you know, I'm going for the first attack. I roll 9 dice. I only hit twice, but I do sink both wounds against the Lycanus, and then I just roll an 11. So, you know, it's easy as that. So if I got a boxcar, I actually do kill it and have to re-roll it. So I'm glad I only got the waiver, because that's what I want. So I waiver this Lycanus, and it looks like I'm going to get double charged here. I am out of range of these wraiths, and then also it doesn't really work with the triple charge, and also this hill's in the way. There's a lot of reasons why they can't do it, but anyway, I'm out of range is the main one. Off here on the right, you can see I went in with the wraiths do kill off the death pack, which is, I mean, it's pretty normal. I think, again, death pack are a 10-12. I mean, I sink like 5 wounds, so I need a 7, and I need a 7 twice, but I do kill off the death pack, so that's good for me. The Lycanus and my dragon go into the unit of wraiths here. I get a flank with the Lycanus. It has Blade of Slashing, so it does like 3.5-ish wounds, or, you know, only somewhere between 3 and 4 wounds, while the vampire, or the vampire on dragon here does like 4.5 or a little under. So on average they do about 8 wounds. I sink only 6 wounds, which is unfortunate because 8 wounds, I mean, again, 8 wounds isn't all that great, and I, definitely messed up my math a little bit because I was forgetting about weakness while I was charging in, and so weakness here, if I'd got the Bane Chant there, and then I can Bane Chant onto the Lycanus or onto the Dragon, either or, to get those bonus wounds, but with the weakness, I don't actually produce as much damage as I was thinking I would, because I'm looking for that 7 twice or maybe a 6 twice to kill, but I roll below average as well, so it's, it ends up not being that big of a deal. I roll abysmally on my break test, by the way, but it's, again, it was a 10 to kill them, so meh. The werewolves do similarly poorly. They again do 2 below. They do 6 wounds to the skeletons. I need a 9 to kill them, and I actually roll pretty well on that break check. I think I roll a 7 or an 8. But again, it's not a 9, so I don't kill them. I think I actually rolled an 8 because I was like, man, if I had just done 1 more. But anyway, that's that, and we move on. Actually, before I move on, the rolls here are actually really interesting because my hits were really good. I think the dragon sunk like 9 hits, and the Lycanus sunk like 7 hits, and then I just roll a wound, and it's all 2s. And the same thing with the werewolves. I think I sunk like 15 hits, and then I only did 6 wounds. So, what goes around comes around, I guess. That's wrong. But anyway, moving on to turn 3. Turn 3, yes, these werewolves and the death pack go into my whites. I'm hoping they don't break me. That might be a bit of a big ask, though, because the death pack do have 12 attacks. They're gonna, on average, get 4 hits, and then they wound on 5s with vicious, so they get like 1 or 2, between 1 and 2 wounds, closer to 1. And then we've got the werewolves here with their 18 attacks, getting 12 hits and then 6 wounds. So 7 wounds on me. It's a 10 to kill, so it's a big ask for them to one-shot me, but they could do it, and I'm really hoping they don't. I do have my Lich King back here exactly 6 inches away, so it is rerollable because I'm not a complete fool. But anyway, we go for that. Up here, the Wraiths here just turn all the way around using their Nimble and go to exactly 1 inch away from Morgoth. They probably aren't 1 inch away right now, but it doesn't matter too much unless my opponent fails all 6 dice from this Necromancer. But anyway, so they're going to try to disorder Morgoth. And up here, you can see so my opponent takes their vampires and their Wraiths into my Wraiths, which is pretty unfortunate. The vampires alone probably kill do they? They've got 25 attacks. Anyway, I don't want to do the math on it, but they do like, 12-ish wounds with vampires or something pretty close to that. So yeah, sending both in is probably bad news bears for me, but you get what you get. And up here, the Wraiths here decide to countercharge into my dragon. Looks like I did 7 wounds, so I guess I did 1 below. So not quite as bad as I thought. Anyway, they go into the dragon. They could have gone into the Lycanus, but that is what Big Lady Leon is going to do. So that 8 attacks, 8 attacks, crush 3, just yikes. And if it goes for the countercharge, it's just not that big. But anyway, 8 attacks on crush 3, that's like, that's like 5-ish wounds on average. So it's still a big ask to even get a waiver. That's an 8. To get it, but still, it's not a big threat to go into that Lycanus because -1 to hit her if I go back in, and so on and so forth. But anyway, go for that, and then the skeletons go into my werewolves because why not? And here is the here is the spells. So my opponent, again, weakness on my dragon. It's a pretty good target for that because there's so much, again, def 5 and def 6 in my opponent's army. And over here, they only do 1 wound to Morgoth, but yeah, still, that's enough to get the disorder, so Morgoth will be running off on my next turn. And here's the end of turn shot. So some pretty weird stuff happened. First off, these guys end up taking like 11 wounds, which is yikes, that's a lot. But I don't die, so my opponent gets the 11, doesn't kill me. So a lot of wounds, but not a lot of payoff. But in the future, this'll probably come back to bite me, unless I get some big drain lives going. And then we have the vampires and the Wraiths going into my Wraiths, and again, they do 12 wounds to me, so a 4 to kill me, and they roll a 3. So this one is unfortunate, but then the luck starts turning the other way again. The Lycanus fighting Alona. Alona does like 7 wounds to me, I want to say, 6 or 7 wounds. It was 6, I remember now. Yeah, so 6 wounds. It's still a 7 to waver, and she nails it, so she gets the waver, which is really unfortunate, because I need to kill these wraiths next turn. The wraiths manage a wound against my dragon, so it can't fly, and then the skeletons here manage, I think, 2 wounds on my werewolves, which is, again, a bit... is that above? It is above average. Well, it's only slightly. It's between 1 and 2 wounds, so not that big of a deal. But yeah, so I'm getting a lot of wounds here, but not a lot of unit removal. So let's see what I can do with that in my turn 3. So my turn 3, first off, if we go back a picture, yeah, these wraiths can definitely see these werewolves, and their leader point is quite easily within the flank. So we go for that flank charge into the werewolves, and then the front with my brutal guys, and then I move my Lich King over here to mess with the Death Pack. And over here, I send my wraiths into the vampires because I need something to help protect my dragon and some other units that are fighting over here on the right. And then I can't even waver the wraiths, and they're def 6, so who cares? So I just go into the vampires. My Lycanus, who is not here anymore, just nimbles and then backs off the hill to hide from Ilona or Leon because she is not on the hill, so why not? And over here, yeah, I do send the dragon back into the wraiths. That's pretty obvious. And over here, I go for a risky charge, which is I send my werewolves and my loot-carrying revenants into these skeletons. My idea was I can try to lure... my opponent has so many more units than I do that I need to lure them into fighting me, right? So I need to go, I don't think you can kill me in one go, and then I will get a counter charge that is a flank charge, so I can kill you in one. Especially with how poorly these combats have gone for me, I need to make up that tempo loss, right? So I send in the revenants as a bit of a trap. I think the werewolves can do it on their own. These skeletons have 5 wounds on them already. And in fact, I don't even roll the revenants in the end. But... yeah, so I go in for that fight, and then I think I can... Anyway, I think I can also limit the number of units that can actually charge me, assuming all these units die. So that's the idea. The revenants will get charged by these vampires in the back, and then I can just come into them with my werewolves and maybe the Lycanus and stuff like that. So here, yeah, and then I, of course, go into this unit. They did life leech one of their wounds back, and... so I go for the Drain Life. I get 4 wounds, which is really good, especially as my Morgoth only did 2 hits. So yeah, getting 4 wounds with Mini Morgoth, pretty good. I kept bumping this. This is at like almost the edge of my table, and I'm exactly placed to not be in line of sight of the werewolves and not be within 18 inches of the Lycanus that's back here, right? But I keep bumping this model, so it's if it looks like it's shifting around, or you're like, you can get charged by the werewolves, keep in mind I can't. That was already something that we'd established many times, and I kept messing with it. So anyway, I get 4 wounds, I get the Waver, so that's pretty good, especially as the Waver I think is exactly what I wanted, or at the time I thought it's exactly what I want, because it's jamming up the werewolves and the Lycanus from being able to do anything about my whites here, especially if I kill off these werewolves. So that's the plan. And over here, my wraiths go into the vampires. They do 3 wounds, and I'm like, well, I need a boxcar, and I roll it. So hot boxcar, get a Waver on those vampires. It was obviously all skill. Then here's the end of turn shot. So off here on the left, you can see this is the side my opponent thought he would be winning, and I actually, well, I thought that I could probably pull back and just piecemeal this out, but I'm doing terribly on the right, and then I'm winning on the left, so it's a bit of a kerfuffle. But I decide to, after I kill off this unit of werewolves, I decide to move the wraiths to dodge the line of sight of these wraiths, and then keep these werewolves and all these units in my front only. And then the whites, though, were in the line of sight of these wraiths, and this is where the being able to crab walk after combat is a huge advantage now. It's a big change. So I just crab walk, I get the 2 inches I need, and I get out of the line of sight of the wraiths, and also out of their charge range to base, right? So I'm just facing down some easier units. My wraiths currently are not inspired, but I'm not too worried about it, because the Lycanus can't see me, and then at best it's going to be, you know, what, werewolves and skeletons, or skeletons and wraiths, or some combination of these 3 units. So I'm not too worried about it. They could go for a flank charge, but, you know, if they go for that flank charge and the front charge, I'm going to be dead anyway, so why bother with the reroll? So yeah, I do have it on the whites, who did life leech 1 of their wounds back, and I had the 4 wounds back from the drain life, so they are down to, I think, what, 6 wounds then? Wow, that was hard math, guys. So yeah, I'm at 6 wounds there. I move forward with a Revenant Cav. This is probably, again, a mistake. I need to be pushing into these loot counters, though, but I don't... I was like, I thought, I was like, oh, the Wraith's leader point is behind the hill, but they could definitely see these Cav, right? And I should have just held them back a little bit more again, but getting hasty, or getting jumpy here. So, yep, and then off here on the right, my werewolves and revenants do manage to kill off the skeletons. Again, my stupid friggin' vampire fails to kill these wraiths, and it's really unfortunate because I do have Bane Chant on it to counteract that weakness. So, going for it, I only hit 4 times, and I don't even sink all those wounds. I do okay, though. And then I think I get them up to 9, and then it's a 7 to kill them, and I fail it. It was re-rollable, but I failed it on the first roll. This is really disappointing because I was hoping to be able to do it on the first roll, right? But definitely on the second, and I'm unable to do it. So this is a bit of a traffic jam for me now, and it's really unfortunate again because I'm ceding tempo every time one of these things happen. So anyway, I back up with the Revenants. The idea was that I can back up slightly because this combat ends poorly for me, or somewhat poorly. It makes it so this unit is still here to block, though, because they are trapped by this line, and then the vampires where they want to go. They can back up a little bit, but it's not going to help this vector. So the idea was to use the edge of my opponent's unit rather than the edge of my dragon because it's farther over, and then also to corner the werewolves. So I have just the slightest nub of difficult terrain right there for the vampires. If they want to charge the werewolves, they will end up being hindered. And then I thought I locked it from these guys being able to make it into my revenants at all, but at the end of the day, I didn't do that. The original plan was to trap them, so I guess it's fine, right? And that's it. So we go into turn 4. So turn 4 for my opponent's undead. First off, we got the Lycanus going into... I'm at 8 wounds? That's not right. Ooh, maybe I forgot to heal. That's that's a snafu. Oops. So anyway, I apparently am at 8 wounds. I should be at 6 because I did go for the life. I got the drain life 4 and then yeah, life leech 1. So that's 5 wounds off. But apparently I just didn't move it correctly, or I took 13 wounds, which is I guess I took 13 then. Yikes, even worse. So anyway, I'm at 8 wounds. I didn't see this Lycanus charge because these guys can back up. They are still nimble, and then they can basically open the door for the Lycanus, so that's a pretty good charge for him. Going in there, still only the 5 attacks, so what is that, like 2-ish wounds, being generous, so it's still 7 to kill me twice. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but anyway. Then we've got the werewolves and the skeletons going into the raids. And part of this is because I told my opponent they only needed to be the majority on my side to get the bonus, the double points for push, but that's my fault. I thought it was like invade, but apparently it's still entirely. So anyway, they go for that. I guess this is showing that off. And then over here, we have Alona going into my very damaged unit of wraiths. They're at 11 wounds still, because my opponent needs to be turning... Well, the vampires here are wavered, so they can't do anything about it. And then the wraiths that were here need to do something else. I'll show you in a second, while these ones need to fight this dragon some more. So showing off the dragon fight. Here is the vampire charging into my loot-carrying revenants. Hopefully that doesn't go too well. They do 11 wounds, I think, on average, or between 10 and 11 wounds onto the revenants. So it's not the best for me, especially as a special friend comes down to annoy me. But anyway, moving on. Yeah, my opponent's Morgoth flew down here as well to give them the dread and to drain them. But anyway, let's talk about the left first. First off, my opponent does 3 wounds with the Lycanus, so a little above average, but then rolls poorly on the break test. Can't get that 6, so I'm still there. Again, a little above average here. My rates take I think 6 wounds, but they're fine. They don't break. That's good. Then we have these rates. Yeah, this is what I was talking about before. These rates charge into my cab, which is really unfortunate. They do 2 wounds to me, I think, but they get the disorder there, and my opponent casts weakness onto them, so Bane Chant won't help me out. And then over here, Morgoth decides to cast into my Revenants. Only does 1 wound, which is good for me, but that plus Dread is probably bad. And then these vampires, yeah, the vampires on average do like 10 to 11 wounds, but instead they sink like 16 wounds or some crazy thing. It was, yeah, between 15 and 17 wounds, because it was double ones without the Dread and without the Drain Life. So yeah, they get all my loot counters, and so they've got 2, and then they turn to face towards my werewolves, who are facing like this. So, yep, we go for that. Again, this goes into my dragon. It doesn't do a whole lot, but my dragon is now staring down the barrel of a gun. It'll need to kill off these rates and overrun on my next turn, which is not ideal, because that makes it so I'm not facing anything to dodge these vampires. I mean, or I guess I could kill them and then turn towards the vampires. I guess that's fine too. Anyway, moving on to my undead's turn 4. So here is the, I don't know what this shot is. Oh, this is my the end of my movement. So first off, this is actually the end of my turn. I forgot to take any pictures. So first off, on the left, we have my Morgoth and the Lich King just sort of changing places. My Morgoth had run off behind the woods over here when it got wavered, so it runs over here to try to kill off the Death Pack, while this guy tries to go into the werewolves. The idea here, in the end, I decided to not try to kill the Death Pack, and I think that was a mistake, because I backed off with the rates. I need something to be able to handle these skeletons, and if I charge the skeletons, I'll get flank charged by the werewolves. If I charge the werewolves, I'll get flank charged by the skeletons. And I don't believe in my rates ability with the Drain Life 16 to actually solve these werewolves. You'd think, like, Drain Life 16, right? That's like 8 hits, 4 wounds from that alone, and then you get another 3 wounds, that's 7 to the werewolves, but that's still a 10 to kill them, or a 9 to kill them because I have Dread. That's not very good math. And on top of it, when I drain both of these into the werewolves to hope for a lucky waiver, and I only managed 3 wounds. Wait, no, did they have wounds? I don't remember, but anyway, they only go to 3 because Morgoth, again, rolls 2 hits, so good job, Morgoth. So, yeah, I don't do a whole lot there. And then in the middle, my Cav do 1 wound to these raids, because I'm winning on 6s with 25 attacks. On average, I think that's 2 wounds, but I only actually hit with a crazy amount, but I only roll 1 6. And then, yeah, my friggin' dragon goes into these rates, does pretty well this time, gets him up to 11 wounds, but I can't roll a 5. I roll a 4. Now I'm gonna get flank charged by these vampires. It's pretty bad. But one thing does go my way, which is right here. My werewolves go for the front into the vampires, and my trap worked-ish, which is I set this up. So basically I set this up so there was no way to face this. They could go for the 4+ overrun to dodge the werewolves, but if they fail it, then the werewolves alone will be able to kill them. If they try to turn this way, they'll get rear charged. If they turn in any direction or move anything except for going for that 4+, they're going to get rear charged or double flanked, right? So they chose the rear with the Lycanus, although I don't think my opponent actually saw the charge, but it doesn't matter. So yeah, they get rear charged by the Lycanus and then front charged by the werewolves. I go for the Bane Chant on the werewolves. I fail, but it turns out it doesn't matter because I kill them off. The werewolves roll well above average, although it's still, you know, what is that, 33 attacks on 3s and 3s. So, you know, pretty good odds that I kill off these vampires. So I do manage to kill them off. I turn the Lycanus. It's actually where this proxy base is, but this is a lead model, so it's not very cooperative. I turn, as you can see, towards the fight. I'll probably be dead next turn to Alona, although, I mean, she rolled well. Maybe she'll roll poorly this time. But losing this, ugh, what a disappointment this dragon's been this game. But anyway, that's that. Let's move into turn 5. So turn 5, this is actually the end of turn 5 because, again, this was a 4-hour game, meaning we ended at 4 in the morning. Or a little before 4 in the morning, but we started a little before midnight. But anyway, yeah, okay, so on the left we have the werewolves going into the rates alone, and that the idea here was that the skeletons I think it's because, yeah, so these Wraiths wanted to charge into my whites. They couldn't do that with the double charge here because these werewolves will slide too far over and block the charge. So another reason why the slide is pretty good, because, oh no, that's right. I'm sorry. Let's roll some pictures back. I forgot to talk about this, which is my whites charge into the Lycanus. They kill it off, so it's not all bad. But again, that drain life, 9 wounds. Yeesh. That's also wrong. Man, I'm bad. Maybe I changed this to 8 after, but that should be 8 because I regened 3, or maybe these guys must have had wounds. Anyway, doesn't matter. I killed out the Lycanus and then I crab walked this way. The idea is to make it so you can't get multiple units into me. Right now, I'm blocking it. The skeletons will have to back up, then the werewolves charge into the Wraiths, and then these Wraiths can charge into me. So just limiting the possibilities. So they do just that. The Death Pact just stay back because I don't need to do anything just yet. And then we have these guys going back into my cab, going for the disorder. And yeah, so vampires in the side, Wraiths in the front. That's just a double one. They kill off my dragon pretty well. Alona goes into my Lycanus, again does 6 wounds to me. So she's like, nope, I do not crack. Kills it off, and then my werewolves are just sitting in the woods wondering what's going on. So yeah, it's not going great right now, but technically, I mean, my opponent's not wholly on my side of the field with this, so they only have 3 points to my 4, but I did tell them that it was majority, so right now they have 6 points to my 4. So there's that. And we move into my Undead's turn 5. So my Undead go for the charge on the werewolves. We're down to 1 wound now. Not exactly sure how that happened. Because did their Morgoth? Oh, it's Morgoth. Yeah, so Morgoth landed over here, went for the Drain Life, got the Heal 1, and then Life Leech 1. So yeah, they go for that. I'm going to go for a crazy play now where I charge and then double Drain Life onto this, probably to try to kill it off. So we'll see how that goes. My chariots go, or not chariots, my Revenant Cav go into these Wraiths forever, you know, pooping back and forth. It's unlikely to do anything, but I do need to. I need to do it if I'm gonna try to win. So I need big rolls. And yeah, this terrible picture. I was unwilling to walk across the table. My werewolves just back out of the woods, so they are currently hiding from the enemy army. Going, nope, we have 4 points. Come and get us if you want them. And here is the end of turn shot. So yeah, my whites did die off to these Wraiths. I mean, again, apparently I was messing up my heal the entire game. So, but yeah, that's not unexpected. And then I went for the Morgoth plus Lich King drain. So I'm draining, double draining onto the werewolves and getting a charge here. I only managed 6 wounds total, which is not what you're going for because again, Morgoth only hits twice. So, yep, not a big roll there. My ASB just moves over a little bit to try to get Banechant over. Oh no, it can't get. Tries to get Banechant onto the cab because my opponent didn't weakness them this time. I fail it though, so yeah. And that is the end of the turn. So we go into turn 6. So turn 6, my opponent has it pretty wrapped up, but they just need to make sure that everything's hidden. Oh, I did get one thing, which is I wavered the werewolves, which I forgot to mention. So yeah, the werewolves just back up to make room for the Wraiths, who are flyers, so they fly in and fight my Wraiths. Again, they're just trying to jam them from being able to get to the skeletons. The other Wraiths back here, we don't have a picture of it, but they do go into my Revenant Cav again. The vampires here just turn towards the Revenant Cav, and this is actually a bit of a mistake. My opponent probably should have turned the vampires like this, because they don't need to kill off the Revenant Cav. They need to make sure that no units can get to these skeletons, right? So turning like that makes it so they could actually go for a charge were there to be a turn 7. But anyway, it's probably not that big of a deal. They do get the disorder there, so they get that. They get the disorder here on my Wraiths by 1 wound, which is yikes. It would have been really nice if I'd been able to fly in and fight these skeletons and go for that Hail Mary play. But I digress. It does not happen. And we go into the Undead, or my Undead's turn 6. So my Undead's turn 6, the Wraiths charge into these Wraiths. They had no way to extricate themselves. I did try to see if they had a line. It's, you know, they just don't have a line on these skeletons where like I could pivot, you know, move them 7 and then go for the the big surge play, but nope, can't do it. I'll just go right past him. So instead, I decide to kill off these werewolves, or maybe I try to kill the wraiths. I try to kill one of these two because I'm going for turn 7 now and just hoping for big plays. I think I go for the werewolves. The cav go back into these guys, going for 1 wound. I think they'd nail it. And, oh, I forgot to mention Alona charged into my ASB very easily, killing it off. So, yeah, it's not on the table anymore. Or maybe it just moved back. I don't know. It either dies this turn, or no, it did. Yeah, it died last turn. So it's I just haven't removed it from the table because it's late. But anyway, here is the end of turn shot. So I do manage to drain the werewolves to death. So that's nice. I manage 1 wound on the wraiths, which is not great, but I do stop them from flying. So I guess that's good. And then the Revenant Cav just continue sitting there doing nothing. I'm going to get flank charged by these vampires. And then we roll up for a turn 7, and there is a turn 7, but I forgot to take any more pictures. So let's go back to this picture, and I will talk about what happened. So first off, my opponent has these wraiths. They could charge into my werewolves by entering the woods and then being surged. They decide in the end to not do that, I guess to make sure that my werewolves can't just get points. Because they're already winning. So they just continue sitting right there. The skeletons just sit right here. The wraiths go into my wraiths. They again only hit. They hit okay, I think, but they get, I think, 3 wounds, which is a little above average, but it doesn't really matter because all they needed was the 1 to turn off my flight. And then these guys hit the cav. These guys hit the cav, and the vampires hit the cav in the flank. So that's 50 attacks. 50 attacks on 3s and 3s, not great. So the cav are killed off. Along with Alona. I'm sorry, forgot to mention that. So the cav are dead. The only thing I have left is over here. I try to kill off the wraiths in the end because why not? But with double drain, I don't get it. This is Morgoth. I guess I could have gone for that, but I just go for this. I don't get it. So that ends up being the end of the game with my opponent having 6 points to my 4, and then a huge attrition lead. But that's to be expected because after I went home and calculated out the points, my opponent was playing a 2750 list, so 450 points more than me, which is not that big of a... I mean, it is a big deal, like, you know, where this not a friendly game, that would be a huge problem. But it's actually not that big of a problem in this case because, one, again, we started really late and my opponent was actually sleeping when I showed up. So, and then they wrote it down, and whenever you're doing napkin math, you can pretty easily mess it up, especially when you're adding and removing units all the time. So they end up being significantly over. I think it's like 16% increase in points. That's a lot. But it's also nice sometimes to play lists where you're at a disadvantage the whole game, because it helps you sort of fight or figure out how you're going to fight from behind, which I haven't actually had to do a whole lot when I'm playing Undead in this edition because they're so versatile and honestly just so point efficient. So yeah, I end up being significantly down on points, but I think I did pretty well here, especially if you consider I did this scenario wrong where the skeletons should have to have pushed harder into my center, and I could have just held them up a bit more with like Morgoth, or not with Morgoth, but by charging into them with wraiths or whatever. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with the turnout, and this is a loss for the Undead, but a win for the Undead. So I hope you guys enjoyed the game, and until next time, bye.